Okay, great. All right, we can begin. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depends on where you are and when you are. This is another webinar on the WEBCON Way, and this one is all about item lists. Have your data and eat it too, if you would. More on this in a few moments, but a common theme with WEBCON is we really like the idea of you being able to not compromise between one set of constraints and another set of constraints. I can think of no better example than what we did to handle item lists compared to what most people do. And when you're talking about item lists, what we really mean is repeating data and how we handle it. We use item lists as a way of dealing with repeating data. And what we mean by repeating data is this. Let's say you have a form. And on this form, a good example of this would be an expense report or a purchase order or things like that. I've got information that people are going to fill out about a request. And in fact, really early on, a lot of workflow solutions with forms in them look a lot like this. There may be more fields, but there's only one possible field and one thing to type in for it. Inevitably, you wind up needing line items where you might have multiple things. These could be expenses, these could be requests, these could be allocations, it could be lots of different things. And typically, not only will you have this master information and this detail information, you might also have the need to aggregate information across all of those line items. Well, repeating data is this, and we use a facility called item lists in WEBCON BPS to handle this. And this is what we're going to get into during this webinar. Now, the other guys out there handle repeating data usually in one of two ways. Both of them have issues, but it's important for you to understand the less than perfect way so that you can appreciate what WEBCON does. So option number one is embedding. This is in fact what InfoPath used to do. It's what a couple of other products still out there and popular do as well, which is to treat the repeating data, let's go ahead and fill in this form, is to treat the repeating data like a block, a repeating block inside of a document. So the form becomes a document. What you see on the left is persisted on the right as a structured XML document. It's a structured document, but it's still a document. This is nice for throwing things into a document-oriented database in some ways. That's actually not a bad idea at all. But at the same time, it's certainly, and while we're at it, these days it seems to be somewhat more fashionable to use JSON instead of XML. I actually think they both have merits for different purposes, but there, I've made it look like JSON. And typically, a lot of those fields might be calculated, like the item total is usually the unit cost times the quantity. So multiply this by this to get this, in which case a lot of people don't store totals of any kind. So let's get rid of them. All right, the document on the right is what will typically get persisted in a document-oriented database. And even if it's not a document-oriented, it could be a SharePoint document library. There are lots of different ways of getting this done. The thing common to all of them is that this is a structured document. The form is a window into a single thing. This is actually really handy in some ways. You have one package. It makes it very easy to copy this to another location or move it. It makes it really easy to secure it with a single access control list. Makes it really easy to archive it at a later point in time and apply metadata to the whole form and such. It's not bad at all. The problem comes when you want to do any aggregation across a lot of documents. So for example, if I want to work across many, many different purchase requests or expense reports, I'm going to have to do a lot of I/O. I'm going to have to do a lot of looping. I'm going to have to do a lot of manual calculations. I mean, if I want to total up everything happening across multiple reports, I have to do what you just saw animated there, which is to run through the line items, jump to the next item, run through the line items, jump to the next item, run through all the line items, and keep maintaining totals. I have to do that myself programmatically. It's not fun. So yeah, some good things, plenty of bad things. So what other people do, Power Platform is predisposed towards doing it this way, just as one common example, but they're by no means unique to that. There are other popular platforms out there that also do the following approach, which is having the line items or the repeating area connect to a different table or a different list. So again, let's go back to this list and how we persist it. Instead of one structured document, we're going to tear the list apart based on normalization. So some information that's just one-to-one with the form, that'll get stored in one table or one list. And then the stuff that's one-to-many, well, I'm going to throw that in a different table or a different list. And there will be a link between the two of them. But now I'm only putting one thing in one place, and this opens up certain doors and, of course, closes others. Good things about this approach? Look, aggregation's really, really easy. I think there's a big payoff to that. If I want to do totals and such, there's minimal I/O, and I've got built-in functions to just automatically sum the amount of items in a column. It's really easy. Aggregating data and joining it together, look, this is all handy. It's not bad, except when I really want to treat this like a document. So let's say I want to archive one expense report. What do? I need to chase a lot of line items in a lot of different tables to make sure I get everything. If I wanted to copy it from one location to another, let's say I'm running this application both on premises and in the cloud. I'm not really thrilled about the fact that I need to start chasing data items in lots and lots of different places. I am spending a lot of my time gathering data across many tables to get anything done when I need to treat the form like a document. Look, let's take securing this. I want to make sure only a couple of people can see form number 1. Well, what do I have to do? I need to create another table to contain who's allowed to see which document. And I can't let somebody query the table directly. They'll see everybody's documents. So I'm going to create views that are there's a join to make sure that you're only allowed to see the items where you, the current user, are listed inside of that authorization table. It's not like you can't do this. It does work. It's just a lot more work for you, the solution designer, to go through. And a lot of people that are comfortable building workflow solutions aren't necessarily prepared to be DBAs. So if you don't want to be a database administrator, this has shortcomings. So let's talk about the WEBCON way to handle repeating data, which is this. We start with what's on the left. This is what you fill out. And then when we go ahead and save this behind the scenes, yeah, we actually do the whole thing with tables. Absolutely, no two ways about it. That is a good way to do it. But we provide a representation of that data on demand that looks like this on the right. So if you want to treat it like data, you can. If you want to treat it like a document, you can. We did all the work in the platform to make data look like documents when necessary. So you can have your cake and eat it too, or query your data and package it too. It's a common theme with WEBCON BPS. We don't want you to have to accept most limitations out there about if you go down one path, you're denied certain benefits. We try to let you have it both ways. We've absolutely succeeded with our handling of repeating data. We use something called item lists to do it. And let's go ahead and build one. I am here inside of WEBCON BPS, and I've got an application open, and I'm going to create a new process. And this new process will be, why don't we call this, let's say purchase requests. And the form type will be a purchase request. Acronym, this is just for easy line numbering or item numbering. Let's see, webinar purchase request and workflow name, purchase request lifecycle. Okay, let's, I'm just doing this by the book. I want to make sure people have the right to see it. We're focused a lot more on forms than workflows in this particular webinar, but a couple of things do warrant taking care of. User privileges, I'm going to make sure administrators can do everything. I do, however, want anyone to be able to start something. All right. Now, let's open this up and start working on it. I'm going to build out, let's see, probably if I'm making a request, I want to know who is making the request. So that will require a person or group choice field. And I probably want, I don't really want to dwell too much on the non-repeating data, but one or two things are probably important. How about just a title for the item? Okay, I don't really need or want more than that, at least not yet. Now I'm going to create another field. This one is going to be called line items. And we have a data type that is essentially a table or a super table. It's called an item list. And in here, I'm going to create a set of columns. So why don't I, in column number 1, let's give this column a name. How about we say item name? Again, it's not fancy. This will just be text. And then here we'll do quantity. We'll do unit. Actually, let's start really simply. One of the great things about WEBCON is how easy it is to make changes to things, right? So how about we just say floating point number, and we'll call this cost. I do want this to be currency, so I'm going to show it as an amount. And that's about it. So let's go ahead and save this. And it occurs to me, could have waited, but that's all right. I'm going to do one more thing. Here in the form, you'll see that the one-to-one data showed up. We put it by default over on the left-hand side. We tend to put descriptive information or meta information about a case folder over on the right, process specific data over here on the left, repeating data on the bottom. You can rearrange this any way you see fit. There are no rules, they're just our best practices or common practices. I'm going to leave everything as is. What I do need to do, however, is come over here and say which fields I want to have appear, when and where. So I do want the employee to be required, same thing with the title. And when it is finished and submitted, I don't want anyone editing anything. And then down at the bottom, I do want the line items to be visible. And yes, you must fill in item name and cost. Tell you what, while we're here, let me show you one other thing. If I wanted to enforce that you have at least one item in the table. All I need to do is click that. That means if the table is empty, the form isn't finished. That's all it takes. I don't need to do any counting or any formulas or anything like that. In fact, yeah, let's do this. Why would you be submitting an item without line items? All right, so let's go over here. I'm going to refresh this and I will start a new workflow. Let's see, we just called this one purchase requests. Let's kick it off. So I will say it's me. I need to pick one. Title, let's see, stuff for my home office. And I could try going to the next step, but oh, look, I need to provide something inside of the repeating area. Okay, let's do that. So item name would be, let's see, I need a better headset if I'm going to be doing conference calls all day. Cost of that'll be for a decent one is 50, at least for my purposes. So now let's go ahead and submit that, and we are off to the races. So far, so good. That is what it is like to create a repeating area inside of our world. So let's go back and talk about reporting. Because remember, I said you could have your cake and eat it too. You can have your data like a document and use it like tables. And so this is not just when it comes to reporting, this is also when it comes to configuring this as a data source that can be used in other places. Why don't we take a look at that in action too, and I'll just build up from that solution. It's probably not a bad idea for me to start a second purchase request. The reason for that is pretty straightforward. Here let's see, let's do this as a different employee. And the title will, well, Alf needs stuff for his home office as well. And let's see, he needs a headset too. He found one that he really, really likes and thinks he can get away with more for it. It's fine. He might have a really good reason for it. And then let's see, what else? Let's have him order one more thing. I am metal. Oh, okay. Well, okay, fine. Let's just do this. He needs a laptop. We'll do that. All right, so far so good. We've now got at least 2 items. That's what I was really going for. And now we're going to create a report that makes use of these. And if you haven't noticed this before, you can create reports in WEBCON without going to Designer Studio. Anyone can do it if they've got a client access license. So I'm going to go here to purchase requests, and just so that process, these forms, the purchase request forms. And now I just need to choose which columns I want to have available. And remember, I want to report, well, we're going to do this. We'll do this in a way that's kind of fun. The first report will be the one I typically like to do, which is, you know, who's the employee? What is the report? What step are we in? Who's it assigned to? How many days have we been there? Let's move the days and the assignee, and for that matter, the step down a little bit further. I'll even add in an automatic button for creating new items, and we should give this report a name. This is purchase requests. Okay, let's save it. Okay, I don't hate this. This is fine, but this still has the same problem as the document store approach. If I want to look at all of the items that have been requested, I have to open every item and scan the line items. I don't like this. Well, remember, we don't really store things like documents. We just present them like documents. So let's go ahead and create another report. This one's going to be a bit more fun. this is going to be purchase request items. All right, and this will still be based on the same process. And this is still going to be based on the same form, but we're going to focus on the line items this time. So here, I don't really care about, I need to keep step in there. It's important. Actually, no, it's important to have step in a data source. It's not so critical to have it inside of a report, but it's okay. Let's stick with this. So I still want to see the name of the employee. I might even want to see the title of the report. But look, the line items are available to report on. So I'm going to throw in the item name and the cost. And I'm not going to allow creating new items because new would really create a whole new report, not a new line item. This is a read-only report. And that's it. Let's close it and check it out. Instead of 2 items here, I have 3 items here because I have these items repeating. Now, if you don't like seeing these column headers, that's not a problem. Let's go back here to columns and we'll edit the header. By the way, the reason you see that there, if you wanted to have different headers for different languages, we did that in another webinar a while back. But it never hurts to plug that. Okay, now this looks like I can sum and calculate and sort and group and do everything. And I'm working on the detail items embedded in a lot of different forms. Okay, a lot, it's 2, but I'm still embedding or looking across 2 different applications and no one's getting hurt. So I have my data that looks like a document. I have my data that looks like a table, defining data sources so that I can use this as a lookup in another field someplace. The definition process works the exact same way. Let's go back and see what next we want to talk about. How about aggregations? Yeah, we make aggregations really, really easy. The other guys make you do the work. You write embedded functions. So if you've got a form, you're going to need to throw a formula into a field and have the field pull data either directly from the line items. In other words, it's going to scrape the user interface and pluck items out of the form visually, or it's going to actually make that query a second time to get the sum. We aren't fond of this approach. The WEBCON way makes the model do all the work. We do the work. So what you define this nice, smart repeating section, and it, when it retrieves its data, just automatically calculates totals and plops them into the fields of your choice. Let's take a look at that in action. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to continue to build upon these purchase requests. So what I'd like to do now is make this a bit fancier. So right now I just have item name and I have costs. And I am going to do some things. Let's go back here and let's go into line items. And I could do a couple of things. Yes, I can do calculations across items, but I'm not going to bother with that right now. I am going to, however, focus on the totals. So here are cost items. They're floating point numbers. They're a perfect candidate for this. Let's do something nice and simple. I'm going to say here in cost, let's go back over here to advanced configuration, show summary and column footer. I already had that checked and had forgotten about that. It's actually the default. So let's go back over here and look at the form. And sure enough, I see a total right here down at the bottom of this. So I have this for free. It's display only. I can't really use it in reports or anything like that. It's just there for display in the form. So I actually don't It's great, I'm sure, for some purposes. I don't want this. I want something better. And I'm willing to do the work because there's almost no work required. All I need to do is to create a field to hold the grand total. And I will make the grand total a floating point number, and I want that floating point number to show up as an amount. Okay, so now I have a place to put the total. And now I'm going to come here to the definition of the item list. Let's go here to advanced configuration. And I'm going to go over here to totals control. And I'm going to copy item aggregates or totals into individual fields. And it occurs to me I need to save this so that the configuration dialog knows that column is there. Okay. Total cost and drop it into that field. That's all I have to do, kids. Check it out. Oh, that's not true. I do have to do one more thing. We have a new field and I need to say it's okay to show it on the form. And we're calculating this automatically, so I don't want anyone touching it. So I'm adding it, but I'm making it read only. And save. Now let's go back over here and reload this form. And I can see that, well, I have an empty field and I have 2 items in it, but what did I miss? Let's go back here. Let's open it up. I'm completely sure this is human error, but let's take a look. I'm going to go here to employee and let's make another one, Alice. And title will be office supplies. And Alice needs a headset as well. Cost will be, we'll go with the standard 50. Okay, now it's working. So I need to do a little bit of work to retroactively update that data in other places. It's actually not that hard. But yes, what's happening is that the line items here, as I add them, the item list is injecting the total into that field. It's not calculated. We have calculated fields. We have rules. You could do this the old-fashioned way, but why would you when you can make the item list do the work? And if you just want the totals to be calculated automatically and displayed, well, we do that without even the little trick I just showed you. So not a bad way to get this kind of stuff done. Excuse me. Now, the flip side of automatic calculation would be enforced sums. This is a great deal of fun. And what I would say is, how about we do this? I'm going to flip over here and we'll continue to improve on those purchase requests. So how about we say, I want to explain where the money comes from. Just trying to figure out a use case for this. So I have form fields, I have line items. There's a grand total being filled out. I need to create a new item list. Call this cost center debits. It's an item list. And here's what I'm going to do. Let's see, I need 2 columns. Center. And I'll just leave that as a single item. We'll add a second column and we'll call this amount. And this will be a floating point number that I format as an amount. All right. Now, here's the deal. What I want to have is that when you go to submit a purchase request, I want you to tell us where the money should be allocated from. You've got different cost centers to charge this to. And it's a charge of $50. We need to spread that. It might all come out of one cost center, but it might be spread across several, and it might be line item by line item, but you might want to tweak where the money comes from yourself. It's just that in that particular report, we've got $50 and I need to spread it around. So let's do this. Cost center debits, and one more thing. Let's go here into advanced configuration and here into totals control. I am going to, and it occurs to me I need to save this first. This dialog box is not aware of new fields that get saved. It's just one part in the user interface that just wants to look at the saved stuff. All right, so control column based on field value. Here's what we're going to do. The amount column is going to look at grand total, and essentially I could do this for verification, or I could just suggest the remaining number, or I could do both. Verification and suggestions is what I choose most of the time. And I will click OK. And we're going to do two other things here. One is, right now the workflow is pretty simple. It's a start, go to the next step, and finish. We're going to get just a little fancier. I need another step here where we have it reviewed. So let's do this. Okay, what the heck? Let's call this submit. And one more thing. Let's call this accept. All right, two things have to happen here. This must be assigned to somebody, so I will just send it to the current user's superior or manager, if you would. And the other thing is, now that I've got this extra step, I'm not going to allow it to move forward without that allocation thing being filled in. Let's go over here. I now see that there's this review phase or stage. And I see employee title and grand total. Now, I don't want the reviewer changing any of these things. And down here on the bottom panel, I also don't want them to edit any of the line items. That ship has sailed. Those requests have been made. But here in Cost Center, I don't want the purchaser or the person making the request to even care about that. Here, we care a lot. So I'm going to display this, and I'm going to insist that it be, we need at least one line item in it. And now you must fill out a cost center, and you must provide an amount. By the time we're finished, I don't want anybody touching anything. All right. Now check this out. Let's go back here, and I'm going to start a new one. Let's make this request from me again. And the title for this will be, let's see, Project X. First line item will be a widget. Widget 7. Widget 7's cost $100. I also need component 9. Those things cost $150. All right, we have a proper total here. I'm going to submit it. There it is. I will go over here to my manager's environment, and let's have a look. I want to see, she has pending tasks. Here it is. This is my Project X thing. And here I have cost center debits. Again, if I just accept this, I'm going to be told I must allocate this across cost centers. Okay, that's fine. I have $250 to spread around. Let's add an item. Now notice, because I said suggestions, it's already offering me the option to put all 250 on the first line item. So I will budget budget center alpha, or let's say we're going to go charge 200 to our equipment budget. And then I'm going to create a new line item. And look, we filled in the remainder. We'll just take this out of petty cash. All right. And if for some reason I try to do this and I try to submit it, it's going to tell me that it doesn't sum to 250. Not bad, eh? There. Think about what it would take to do that in most other environments. It would be painful. You need to be calculating things left and right and then creating rules or scripts in order to deal with things. We know this is a common use case. We automated all of that for you. Whoops. Initializing is also a really easy thing to do for us because sometimes you don't want an empty grid. You want somebody to see a grid that already has stuff in it. Turns out that's not a painful thing for us either. Let's go ahead. And because we think that the cost center debits are going to be filled in quite often, why don't we go ahead and initialize this on a regular basis? So I will come here to initialization, and I can do it only in the first step, or I can do it every single time, and it can be static, or I can do a query to fill in everything, but I'll stick with a static initialization this time. So cost center will be equipment. I won't know what the amount is yet. And then the second thing will be travel, entertainment. Let's see, services, and petty cash. And because I am not 100% certain what the effect is, if there's no thing provided here under amount, I'm going to put 0 there. So now we make somebody think this stuff through. So I'll click OK. And I'll save it. And now, if I create a new purchase request, and again, I'll make it from me. Submit it. And I should see, you know what I did wrong? 2 things. Here under cost center debits, I don't see anything filled out yet. I don't see it pre-initialized. Well, this is for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that I said initialize only on the first step, and I wasn't looking at it on the first step. If this table were meant to be filled out in the very first step, then everything would have been fine. In fact, it could have happened behind the scenes in the first step, except that I don't have these fields appearing on the form in step 1. So I had 2 choices. I could have put these forms on the fields on the form in step 1 and then added some rule-based logic to hide them in step 1. I don't particularly love that. Or I could have said initialize it on every step. If you initialize it on every step, but there is existing data, we're not going to override it. It's going to be fine. I should have done that. All right, let's move on. And talk about rules. Now, rules are kind of handy. I can use rules for lots of things. In other words, I can work on the interim contents of what's going on inside of line items. And I'll show you one that's a little bit fancier. So, whoops. Let's go here to one that already exists. These are expense reports. And here under form fields, I have items. And in fact, here, I'll show you one that already exists. Here's an expense report. So I have an expense data, vendor, a description, an amount, and a currency, and then the amount converted into United States dollars. So there are two things going on. And here's another one. Let's do purchase orders. It's similar to purchase requests, but I've built it already, and it looks a little bit like this. So I have some line items for what was ordered and some line items for how to spread it around, the commission around. But here I have a unit price times quantity and an item total. Let me show you how both of these things are done. Let's do purchase orders first. Here in line items, I have a unit price, which is a floating point number. I have a quantity, which is a floating point number, and then I have item total. This is a calculated floating point value column. It doesn't mean we won't persist it, but we will calculate it on the fly all the time anyway. And here's the, if you needed to concatenate text fields together, that's what a calculated text value is. But I definitely want this to be a floating point value. And then how do you deal with that? You go here under advanced configuration and you build up a formula. You'll see all of your form fields. You'll see all the appropriate operators. You can put it together the way you normally would. That's how you do a calculated field, but that's just field calculations. If you want to talk about rules, things get a little bit more interesting. What I want to do is when I fill in an amount, let's go ahead and throw in, so actually this one is finished, so I'm going to cancel editing. I'm just going to create a new request. So employee will be, let's make this bill, title A1. Okay, expense date, we'll make that today or yesterday. Vendor will be the Acme Corporation. Description, widget, amount $55, and we'll say this was 55 Canadian. Notice how this has changed immediately to $39.04 US. You'll also see that it popped up as an edit window. I'll show you more about that in a minute too. But right now it's how we got this automatic stuff working. We're using a business rule. This isn't really the purpose of this webinar, but WEBCON actually has a service that downloads currency conversion values. You set up a schedule for it. We can grab it from several different central banks. I'm using the EU central bank for my data, but I have a business rule here that queries a data source where I'm checking the source currency and the target currency and getting back an exchange rate, and then I'm multiplying that by a source amount. So this is a business rule. It returns a value and it executes on the back end. There's also a form rule that I'm using that performs operations on a form and executes in the front end. Our rule technology presents you with a consistent approach to doing rules. It just so happens that the front end rules, the form rules, translate into JavaScript when they run, and the back end rules translate into SQL when they run and get executed on the back end. So I am doing a check here to say if the amount is empty and the currency, if it's not empty, if we have a field in amount and we have a value in currency, then set in the items list called items, the column called standard amount, put in the outcome of this call to that other business rule. So I have access to, in formulas, all of the fields and all of the columns in different locations. They're always available to me. I can use them as parameters to a business rule invocation, or I can use fields. You definitely want to use set row value as opposed to just dragging standard amount here and putting it on the other side of an equal sign. That would have just been a comparison value to say, is standard amount equal to the outcome of that? The answer would be false, and that would be the outcome. Use set row value when you're setting values. That's all I'm getting at. All right, so all it took was one form rule calling one business rule. And why did I encapsulate it in a form rule? Because I want it to happen up to 3 possible times. You see, when you put in the expense date here under style and behavior, I can indicate what should be executed when the value changes. And I'm just calling calculate standard amount. That's this form rule. I'm also calling this if the value of amount changes, or if the value of the currency selected, source currency selected, it changes. So if any of them change, I call the same form rule. The form rule knows how to deal with the current row. I don't need to do a row column specification or anything like that. We assume you're always operating on one row at the same time. If you want to look across all the values in a row, that's when you come up here to the item list itself and play around in configurations. But yeah, rules on forms, it's not a painful thing at all. Now, I mentioned that we would talk about display options, and I meant it. So let's take a look at exactly what we mean by display options. In some cases, you saw me go ahead and add a line item and a custom form popped up. In other cases, let's go back over here. If I added a new item, I'm just editing in place, right? Well, I might like either approach. I suppose if I just have a couple of columns, editing this like a grid is a happy thing. On the other hand, if I have a lot of columns in the list, I definitely want this kind of approach instead. It's a much happier experience. It's sort of like a form, a pop-up form inside a form. They both have their merits. And as it turns out, it's really easy for you to choose. In fact, you can get very clever about this. So check this out. I'm going to go here to, let's see, why don't we go to the purchase requests here under line items. And what I would like to be able to do is, well, you'll see what's going on here. What I have right now is single row editing turned off. So if I go here to purchase requests and I create a new item and I add a new line item, it looks like this. And then if I'm just editing something in place. What I would like to have happen now is change it. Let's turn on single row editing. And now I'm going to go back over here and refresh the page and click add. And am I editing the right one? This is purchase requests, right? Hang on. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't save. Let's reload. Let's click add, and now we have a pop-up. I'll put Z or Z, and the cost is €1. And in fact, I will do one more little trick that I think you'll find amusing. Single row editing is turned on, but I might want single row to be the default unless we have a lot of line items, in which case we don't want people to have to open every single one if you want to make a lot of changes. So let's turn on allow all rows editing and set a threshold for when it kicks in. I'm going to have allow all rows editing start after 3 rows. So let's click OK, and let's click save, and I'll show you what the effect is. Let's reload, and I will put in 1 item here, finish. I'm going to throw in a second item here, and put that in, and now when we put in the third one, this is going to trigger what we want in just a moment, because now for the fourth, now that I have the fourth, I can click edit all, and I have the option to treat this like an editable grid. If I remove 1 item and I click edit all, I still see that show up, but okay. It basically allows you to turn that on and off as the case may be. Once the threshold has been hit, everything starts to work. All right, let's see. What else can I show you about this? Actually, I've covered it. I've covered everything we wanted to cover in the course of an hour. We're almost finished. And so in summary, essentially, if you add up together the table style storage approach we take, but the ability to use everything as if they were documents, and the automatic totaling, and the rules, and the data sources, and the reports, and initialization, well, that adds up to a wonderful way to workflow, the WEBCON way. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. We really appreciate you having doing this. We're doing another webinar next week, and no 2-week period goes by without us doing another webinar. So please stay tuned. Recording of this will be on our YouTube channel, and anytime you want to see more information about us, please go to www.webcon.com. And I will hang around for 4.5 minutes to see if anyone has any questions they would like to ask. By all means, fire away if you've got some. I'll stay around. In fact, was there anything else we still wanted to show? Look, there's always room to show off more features. One thing we didn't talk about because there just wasn't time for it is the ability to group items or do conditional formatting on rows. By default, we do different shades, like we slightly gray shade every second item in a list, but you can turn that off if you don't want it, and you can customize what the colors are. So that is certainly possible. And again, grouping the items can also be done. Item lists are much, much, much more than simple editable grids. Any questions? If you've got one, but it's going to take you a while to type, just say typing and hit enter, and then I'll know that a question is on the way. You can just type them into the chat window. I will treat this like an auction and say, going once, going twice. All right, sold. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll see you next time.